We have some very strong opinions and ideas, and I think we'll probably state those opinions now.
Okay. Hey, everyone. I don't even have an opening. Nothing. This is just a last minute. We need to get on and talk about what in the actual F happened last night, because that was crazy. I'm with German. We're going to do sort of a mini episode. Hopefully it doesn't go too long. Tomorrow, Wednesday, April 30th, we will be doing a deep dive into what happened yesterday, along with I'll have like more clips and we'll take a closer look at things. Things might start to pan out a little bit, for example, and we're going to get to this pretty quickly. What happens with Pierre Poilievre? He has officially lost his seat in Carleton, Ontario. Thank you, Carleton. So he's out, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's entirely out. So before we get to that, how are you, German? Where did you spend elections? How late were you up? I was up until 3. Then I had to take my dog to the vet at 10 because that was poor planning on my part.
Fair enough. I'm okay. And stayed up pretty late. Watched the results when I got back from an elections party. Not a conservative party by any means, but a highly partisan party at times, for sure. It was fun. Of course, they were pretty disappointed on the results, as you can imagine, but it could have been a lot worse. So they were kind of happy it wasn't a majority Liberal government. But
it could have been a lot worse. The Conservatives, we'll get into the numbers tomorrow, but the Conservatives like came out of the gate in Atlantic Canada, and that kind of set that tone. Like you could see Jason Kenney was on CBC, and you could see his face light up. Of course, at one point during the night, he took his ball and went home and didn't appear again for like 2 hours.
Yeah, and like it was a smaller event for sure, right? And like I was talking to people, and people were saying the Conservatives are probably not going to show up today because of the fact if they lose badly, they don't want to be around people, right?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: they didn't lose as badly as the polls indicated. We don't know what's going to happen yet. They are still counting advanced votes, which tends to lean heavily Liberal. So as it stands right now, they are leading or elected in 168 ridings. There's currently 11 ridings where they are in second, and they've just started counting the advanced votes, and the Liberals have gone from being behind 3,000 votes to being behind hundreds of votes. So we don't know what's going to happen there. If they just manage to win 4 of those, we could still see a Liberal majority government. So that'll be quite interesting. But yeah, like the Conservatives could have done a lot worse. Ontario was not as red as they thought it was going to go. There was some weird stuff that happened there. NDP Liberal vote split happened in some cases, but here's the weird thing, and we'll get more into this on Wednesday once all those advanced polls are counted, because we don't know if they'll flip them. But there were a lot of ridings, particularly around like the working class areas, where it looks like at this moment in time the NDP vote went to the Conservatives. Like they won over those working class people. Yeah, so I guess like really quickly, give me your thoughts on that before we jump into Poilievre. Like I said, I don't want to go too far in because we'll talk Wednesday, but like this was really interesting as I was watching. Terrifying, but interesting.
Yeah, it very was interesting, and it feels like that they were able to capture those votes, which they seem to struggle without to get, right, throughout the campaign, right? And it's just a very unpredictable, surprising result if you start diving right into the numbers, right, of any riding in the city or any even ridings across the country, right, to say the least, right? So
yeah, even Calgary, like a Calgary McKnight, I haven't looked at it recently, but they were a blue, the Conservatives still ahead and projected winner. But the vote split on the left, and if that hadn't happened, the Liberal incumbent would have kept that seat. So that was like interesting. It flipped blue. But then was Calgary Confederation officially called? Do you know?
Yeah, it was officially called Liberal.
Yeah, so like weird.
So that's exciting for the Liberals for sure. But the kind of the silver lining is that they actually lost. I think it's not Skyview, it's the other riding that George DeHall now is in. So,
yeah, that's what I heard.
So they lost that riding. So they kind of received one but lost the other. So it ended up being
so they're just a wash.
And that was the really interesting thing. Like that's a sobering thought for the Liberal Party. They did really well in Confederation, but lost George DeHall's riding, and so that was very interesting. And then if you dive into other things, right, in terms of the other elections, like particularly Signal Hill, they did very well in Signal Hill. They weren't close, but they actually did better than they've ever done in any thing. So you can say that Liberals increased their votes regardless, right, across the board.
Well, CBC was talking about how in Alberta it looks like, in terms of like the Liberal popular vote, the Liberals had the most support here this election than they've had since 1968.
Yeah, and also they said, because I know the candidate who's running as the Liberal candidate in that riding, Signal Hill, it's the fourth highest percentage since Alberta joined Confederation in 1905, and the highest since 1940. And also the most votes that a Liberal candidate has ever received was over 73% of the riding voting, right?
Yeah,
so
I mean,
it's amazing. Like, she did amazing, even though she didn't do close. It wasn't close. It was like 35% for her and 65% for the Conservative.
But it's been crazy, right? So let's take my riding. I'm not going to say who it is or where it is because that's doxing myself far too close to home. But my MP last time won by 85%. He only won 68% of the vote last night, which is still like a lot. But when you look at him over the course of, I think he's been here 3 elections now. He's a fairly new MP, but like he was always up in the 80s in this area. And people have been more open on his Facebook page too, like being more critical, sometimes respectfully, sometimes they're jerks. But I'm definitely seeing a lot more of that, which is quite interesting. Of course, we're still Alberta, and I was also seeing immediately last night on my community page calls for separation, and I'm moving to Texas posts. And
I saw that too. I saw that too. And then, of course, you have people saying no way, and people saying go ahead and move, right? And people saying
I saw one comment that said try not to end up in El Salvador
or something like that. And it's like, honestly, I know people said that was going to happen, but if it was a majority government, I could see that happening potentially in terms of like the dissidents going around. But it's still,
they'd move when Harper won. Nobody moved. There's like one guy, and he wrote a book called "I Actually Did It," and it was when Trump won in 2016.
But I tell you, it's interesting because they think the Liberals increased their vote across the city, so that's crazy. It's crazy, right? And so there's a bit of a progressive voice going through the city right now.
Yeah, and so we'll hold the thought there because I do want to have a quick conversation about that after. But like, let's talk about this Pierre Poilievre thing.
Oh man, that's crazy.
Like, this is insane. So first, let's say that Poilievre did increase. Like this, he's got crazy numbers. They haven't seen numbers like this since Brian. Is that his name? Mulroney? Is it Brian Mulroney? Yeah. Okay, Mulroney. Since then, right? So like 41.4% currently, as it sits, of the vote share in elected or leading ridings. That's like majority territory. That is more than Stephen Harper got. Problem is, Quebec, and this really does come down to Quebec. We thought it was going to be an Ontario thing, but this was people in Quebec that lent their bloc vote to the Liberals, essentially. And then obviously they took a little bit from the NDP, but That's just insane. So first, he managed to gain 12 seats in Ontario, which nobody saw coming. But then at the same time, he lost his seat. This is very interesting. And it kind of makes me wonder, like, he's held Carleton since 2004. This should have been an easy pickup for him. And it does make me wonder. Actually, you know what? Let's get your thoughts first before I give you mine. I suspect it'll be along the same lines, but
it probably will be. Like, I think it probably will be, but I'll take a different spin on it. It's a very upsetting election for him, for sure, right?
yeah.
And it's a very upsetting election for the Conservative Party anyway, even though they did do well, right, overall, and they did increase seats. They did receive, I think it was the voter share they got, right, stuff like that. But they didn't get the prime ministership, and they lost.
And
the
they
leader.
blew the 25-point lead.
And they lost the leadership the leader as well. And hearing Pierre Poilievre talk last night, saying that he's not going to step down and that these things take time. I know we'll probably dive into it a lot more tomorrow as well, but it's just going to be a bit of a crazy thing. And even I was in a more conservative event last night, and I could tell you they were cringing. They were saying, "Why are you not resigning? Right?
Yeah.
And why are you not leaving? Why you're killing the party, right?" And I can tell you, these are people who, like the one lady who I was sitting across the table with, wrote Pierre Poilievre's last speech, she said. And she was like, "Oh my God, he is not leaving," right? And these are people.
No, they're going to have to drag him out of there kicking and screaming, I think.
Yeah, and it's like, and it's not like yes, he's jobless. Yes, he doesn't have.
He has a $120,000 Canadian pension. He's fine.
I know, but beside the point. But he's jobless and he doesn't have a house.
He's fine.
Yeah, but he's a career politician, and that's the biggest issue, right? And so he's never really known anything more than what he's been involved in. And so to have people like them say, like, they're really upset and really kind of cringing when he says, "I am not resigning," and everything like that, that is scary, right? So that means he's trying to be stranglehold in this party right now, and that's a weird situation to even have.
Well, and I guess caucus is going to have to figure out what they want to do with him, right? Because he can stay on technically as leader, but what would happen in that case is somebody that won a Conservative seat, probably in Alberta, if they're smart, will have to step down, and then Carney will have to call a by-election so that Pierre Poilievre can run. Now, here's the thing about that. So the Conservative caucus has to decide that this is like a thing. Rosemary Barton and Kenny were kind of going at it last night because she was like, "No, people for weeks now in the Conservative Party have already been after him. I have sources in the party." Jason Kenney, obviously being like a well-known conservative, can't be like, "Yeah, that's so true." So instead he took the position of, "Well, I haven't heard that from anyone," which, okay, sure, Kenny. So that's going to be like quite interesting. And I don't think we're going to hear about it, but like, he lost his seat. The Conservatives were down, like, blew this 25-point lead where it should have been the biggest, not only the biggest Conservative majority in Canadian history, the biggest majority in Canadian history. He didn't pivot. There's lots of news outlets that had sources about sort of problems within the party trying to get Poilievre to pivot to Trump, and he just wouldn't do it for reasons we've already discussed on this podcast. So it's really, really hard to say what will happen here. And of course, then there's the hypocrisy of it, because since Carney won the Liberal leadership race, Poilievre was saying, like, "You aren't an elected, you need to be elected, blah, blah, blah." So, like, there's also this piece of it, right? Like, and this is politicians, right? Like, they're all hypocrites. But to have it so soon where he's like, "You're not elected, this isn't democratic," to go, "Well, I lost my seat. There's lessons to be learned, but I'm just going to make somebody else step down and then stay on as leader," like, is insane to me.
And it's a very weird situation for sure. And the way he was talking last night, it sounded like he's willing to dig in and really wanting to stay around and really trying.
And his unity thing, that was like how many days was the election campaign?
Like 30 something.
37 days. Like that's 37 days too late, buddy.
And he was like saying like something like, I know we didn't win, but at the same time, change takes time, and and all this
It
thing.
was weird, right?
It was weird, and like honestly, right now, it just shows you who he is, right? At the end of the day, and it shows you that he's really doesn't really care. Like he's worried about his job more than anything right now.
But it also shows that like people in Carleton had enough, right? Like,
Yeah.
Here's the thing that the Conservatives need to figure out. If we look, because it's now been 4 elections, 4 leaders have been tossed. Okay, 3 leaders and probably Poilievre. Like, let's be honest, that's going to be a uphill battle for him to keep leadership after losing his seat. If he hadn't lost his seat, maybe. So that's like 4. And if you look at like who was winning leadership, like as we move down this line, it's just getting further and further and further right. And what we saw last night was Quebecers from the bloc lending their vote to the Liberals, and some NDP voters lending their vote to the Liberals, not necessarily because they like Carney, but because they didn't want Poilievre. Like, yes, there's the Trump thing, but the Conservatives' platform was so far right that people were scared. And so, like, for me, I'm looking at this and saying, okay, are the Conservatives finally going to take this lesson and move to a more progressive conservative type situation where you see somebody like Doug Ford winning? Mark Carney, regardless of anybody who's going to yell at me in the comments, is a red Tory. He is a progressive conservative. Voters are rejecting this. Or, and here's my bigger fear, are they going to go with Vance's friend, Giovanni?
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? And they were talking about a few of those people, and there's a few people in the Conservative Party that they're really worried about too, right? And it's not just Giovanni. Giovanni's one of them for sure, right?
Yeah, but like out of all of them that have come up, like Giovanni is like somehow worse than Poilievre. Like, did you see his interview last night?
I didn't see his interview, if I'm honest with you, but
I'm
sure.
Watch it before tomorrow, because we're going to talk about it. He spent pretty much the whole interview yelling about Doug Ford.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised. He's just a crazy guy anyway. I've known him for many years.
But he's also, here's the other problem with him, right? He's a friend of JD Vance. And so, like, out of all of these people, he's the one I'm most concerned about. Like, I'm really concerned about which way the Conservatives are going to go, because it's been 14 years. I don't know if they've figured it out yet.
Yeah, and honestly, it's scary, right? And like I said, after hearing Poilievre speak last night, it was just a freaky situation too, right? And like honestly,
he tried to be very like put together and humble, and like even when he congratulated Carney and everybody started booing, he was like, "That's not the time for this." And I was just like, "Do you know who you are?" Like. And that's the thing, right? Like, if he had gone into this campaign a little differently, we could be having a different conversation right now. So, like, as I was watching that, I was just like, where is that Poilievre? Like, he got to unity quicker than Mark Carney did. Mark Carney eventually got there last night, but you and I were texting, and the whole time I was like, he's not talking about unity yet. He's just talking about his win. He needs to talk about where's the unity thing. And then there was one point where I said to you, "Oh, here we go." And then I was like, "Nope, just kidding. He's not actually going to go there."
And I was listening to all the speeches, and I tell you, like the way Poilievre was handling the speeches was like absolutely terrible. And like I tell you, like you can tell people were just absolutely like, what are you doing, right? And I remember reading an article, and they said that actually that people at the doors were wanting someone who actually is a lot more present in the riding, and that's why they threw their vote towards the Liberals, right? And they felt like
they obviously knew that he was in trouble in his riding, because they sent volunteers there the last week, and he headed home to his riding.
And honestly, and that's that whole thing about 91 people on the ballot. How crazy!
I was looking to try to figure out how that was going to impact things. And I'm going to go through the numbers more tomorrow, like this afternoon before our thing.
I briefly
I'm
looked at
really
it. It really
curious.
didn't matter. It really didn't matter, if I'm honest with you. It didn't really, it wasn't like high votes at all. Like they received like one person received 0 votes.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't surprise me. But there
Yeah, and
were
then another person
some
got
that were like,
100 maybe, if anything.
yeah, up
So
there.
like I'm sure it would add up in a few more votes, but it really didn't matter as much as it probably could have, right? And so that was interesting to see, right? And like I know they were doing the protest vote, and they chose that riding to do a protest, but that place had one of the highest voter turnouts as well, and also
43,000 in advance voting.
the advanced ones were really high. So like that shows you that people wanted change or wanted something different.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like when you see a riding like that, because this was a weird election, right? It was about change, but it also wasn't about change. Holy crap. And here we go. The Liberals just ticked up to leading in 169 ridings.
Wow.
We're getting there.
So like we could have a
Conservatives
majority
down.
government, right? A majority government in no time, right? Status. And like honestly, it's and then but the one thing the people who were very concerned were really scared about is having the Bloc Québécois prop up the Liberals. So you have a Bloc Québécois with the Liberal Party. The Conservative people are really scared about that, holding the balance of power.
So let's talk about that, because that's a really good segue into just talking about what the Liberals need to do. Because whether this is going to be a majority or not, it's a win, but not a mandate. No. We need to remember that, because literally this was people lending their votes to the Liberals to keep the Conservatives out, whether that was because they didn't like how far right they were, they didn't like their stomping on rights policies, maybe it was the crime stuff, maybe they felt that the Poilievre was they didn't know what he was going to do, he's very Trumpian, maybe they felt Mark Carney, like whatever the case may be, it was lent votes. And a lot of that happened in Quebec. And Carney's going to have to be, the Liberal Party is going to have to be very savvy here, because he's going, and he said this last night, like being the prime minister for all people, if he wants to have any chance in 4 years' time, he's going to need to recognize that Quebecers gave away their bloc votes to him so that he could beat Poilievre, which means he's going to need to work with the bloc in order to try to hold some of those votes later. Now, I'm not saying that he needs to like do giant concessions here on sovereignty and that kind of stuff, but the reality is Quebec handed you this election. If everybody had stayed with the bloc, and because they lost 10 seats to the Liberals, so that would put them at 159 and the Conservatives at 144. Then we're in like a whole other clusterfuck. Yes, the Liberals could hold, if they hold 169, they could absolutely do this with just the NDP. But I think it would be stupid on their part to not look ahead and say, okay, we need to work with Quebec and see where we can get. And Blanchette talked this morning. I was listening to him on the way to my vet appointment, and he was very much, he was like, I'm not saying we need to put sovereignty aside, but right now we need to put a pause on partisanship and sovereignty to figure out how we're going to do this. And he basically said, like, Quebec just handed you a potential majority, but definitely a strong minority government. So maybe come work with us. Yeah,
and that's the thing too. You have to realize that that's a big thing they have to consider too, because that's going to be a problem, right? If they don't do those things right too as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Conservatives would be in a really good spot next election.
But, considering, like they increased all of their votes in Alberta, especially in the Calgary area, which is great for the Liberal Party. But at the same time, they struggle to even gain the seats, which is another issue.
Yeah, and I mean, Saskatchewan, like Saskatchewan and Alberta are pretty much throwaways. Like those are hardcore Conservative provinces, and Carney is going to have a lot of work ahead of him to try to figure that out. I mean, and here's the other thing, like he talked last night about being an energy superpower in both clean and conventional energy. But the bloc today was already talking about, like, you're not getting a pipeline through here, buddy. So like we already have like Canada, like one province throwing away out the whole like unity interprovincial trade thing, like not even 24 hours after the election. So I
Yeah,
don't know. I don't know how that's gonna go.
and that's the thing, right? That's you know, they actually just released the voter turnout numbers too, I think, as well.
Was I correct?
You guys are really high. I'm actually the closest still.
Hmm?
I'm actually still the closest, I believe.
What'd you say?
I said 70, or I said 68, 68, between 68 and
Well, what's
70.
it at?
Looks like Monday's election, with 67.4% of registered electoral
Yeah,
voters.
so you and I are the closest. I mean,
Yeah.
the bad news is I didn't actually talk to Rio about our bet because I forgot, so it doesn't actually matter.
But still, I was the closest. There we go. 68%.
I mean, I said 65. It's pretty close.
Fair enough.
I'll do
We-
dinner. I'll have you guys over for dinner and we'll make Rio bring wine.
Fair enough. And then I actually said that we'd have 5 NDP at the yesterday, and we had 7 right now. So
I don't know. What is this? Okay, where are they leading? Do we know?
I think you can find it online, right?
Yeah, I just have the map open. NDP leading ridings now. Real-time stuff, guys.
Yeah. No, but it's interesting. Like I said, I was not sure where they would be, right? At the end of the night.
We still don't know where they'd be because I know a couple of these.
Leading in 8 is for the Liberals, 5 for Conservative, and 1 for the NDP. So the NDP could lose that 1 seat that they're leading in.
And where is it?
And
how close is the thing?
I actually don't know.
Does it say what riding it is?
No, I just have the overall.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm looking at that too.
So let's see if you can see if I can. Where's that one? How come I can't zoom? Oh, it looks like it's in BC, Kelowna.
Oh, Kelowna. Kelowna's been weird too.
By 170 votes. So
they were talking about this on CBC.
Yeah, it's 170 votes. There's 1 poll left. So that's probably that advanced poll maybe or something like that.
The last polls seem to be special ballots and advanced vote. So
yeah,
special
it's
ballots are like
170
international
votes.
Students, that kind of stuff. But like 170 votes is not, that's still a danger zone.
Yeah, because right now it could be a conservative riding. So
is that who's in second?
Yeah, who's in second? It's like 40.
Oh, geez. Okay, I'm
47.7%, 47.7%, and 47.4%. So it's about less than. It's like 170 something.
Well, the really shitty thing about all of this too is the recount process. People are going to be demanding recounts. And I bet Poilievre was already on the phone this morning, even though he lost by like.
Yeah, so like depending on where those other ridings go, right, it could be a problem, right? Right? Like right now the Conservatives have 5. I don't know how many Liberals are in those ridings, right?
Well, I know that when CBC was looking at stuff this morning, and they've already won one of those. They're now elected in 159, leading in 10. They're at 169 seats. It's possible. We'll have to see. But even if they just pulled out 169, like finding 2 votes on the floor, like May's not going to vote.
Yeah, but this one's in Cloverdale. This one's in Cloverdale, Langley. So there's 2 polls left. So this could be interesting because this one is conservative right now, and the second place is Liberal. So this one could be tight. It could be tighter, but I don't know whether
that was one of the ones they were talking about. Yeah.
So that one could be tight. It could be tighter, but I don't know how much those other polls would matter, right? Too much.
Well, and the thing is there's thousands of votes in some of those polls, right? Like they were looking at one in Atlantic Canada where the Conservatives were ahead the whole time, and then they got a dump of advanced voting and the Liberal was ahead by like 3,500 votes because those advanced voting ones can have like 4,000 votes in them.
Yeah,
so it just becomes this like massive dump, right? And we know that advanced polls tend to lean more like in favor of the Liberals, especially over Easter weekend, with how all of that like sort of shook out
Yeah, so it's hard to say, like I said, for these closer ones, right? For sure.
Yeah,
right?
and I know Fred Delaney this morning was on not Good Talk, Peter Mansbridge's other thing, and he was like, all I can say is I'm glad the Liberals stopped campaigning after Easter.
Well, that's one way to look at it, right? But it's interesting, like it's interesting, right? It's pretty tight in some places for sure, right? But like
insanely tight.
It's very tight. Like those votes really matter. Even the ones in Alberta are very tight still. Like I know
they're
they're
up
off
to
by
160 elected now.
160.
Another one flipped. So they're 160 elected, leading in 9, and then they're watching 8.
So yeah, it's still a lot up in the air right now, right? And like even center, even though it wasn't really tight, it still was pretty close, right?
There was a couple conservatives that, like former conservatives that were on CBC talking about how like with this kind of minority, Mark Carney can basically govern like he has a majority because he's going to find the one vote in the NDP or the Green every time. It's going to happen. Maybe even the Bloc. So like this is quite weird. And like not where they wanted to be, right? Like the polls were showing, and I think this is the problem. I think the polls were kind of the problem because they were showing like seats up into the like 190s. And I honestly think part of what happened was people were like, oh, well, I can go vote NDP again, which like thankfully they did because that sort of stopped the NDP from being completely wiped out, I guess.
If you look at the seat count right now, if it holds the way it is right now, it's 169 for the Liberals, 144 for Conservative, 22 for the Bloc, 7 New Democrats, and 1 Green. So technically,
she's been elected. So
yeah, and so technically the Liberals are technically at that majority level.
Yeah, they only need 2 votes in the House.
Yeah, and so like they're technically going to be able to govern, and when you don't even have your leader, Pierre Poilievre, in place either. And I think
want to know what's going to happen with that. Like, I don't want to wait. I just wanted them to come out and be like, you never have to listen to him talk again.
What they were even saying at the party is that they were saying they were thinking Andrew Scheer might be the House leader.
You know what? Somebody was talking about that on, I want to say it came up on CBC, but like, I can't see them doing that. Although I will say Andrew Scheer now, after Poilievre and like all this other crap, might not seem so terrible.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? The Conservatives have a trend to technically to kick out their leaders every time they lose anyway. So
well, it's in their like. So here's the thing, right?
They have to go through a leadership vote.
They have to have a leadership review in their thing, right? So like either way, Poilievre is facing a leadership review at the very minimum. But like the guy lost his seat. And the Conservatives really need to look to the next election and learn some lessons here. Like, Canada's not the US. You can't go that far right and then be shocked. I can't remember. I want to say it was a Conservative that was talking about this, but I might be incorrect. So I'll just say somebody was talking last night and they were saying, like, I think it was the Conservative, was that like if the Conservatives want to actually have elections where they basically don't have to rely on rely on the surge of the NDP to split the vote and come up the middle, they need to move to a more progressive conservative platform with a leader that is more progressive conservative, less kind of like anger Trumpian attack dog type thing, because it really a lot of voters to the point where freaking separatists their vote to the Liberals.
Yeah, and like honestly, this Pierre Poilievre thing, like one of the things says that he didn't just lose his seat, he likely lost his home because he's staying at Stoneway, that taxpayer funded house for the opposition, right? And that's a thing, right? He's no longer leader of the opposition anyway, so that's
what happens in politics. You have to move. I'm sure he's a like slum landlord and has like 5 houses. I'm really not concerned for Poilievre's living situation. He's going to be making $120,000 a year. Do you make $120,000 a year for doing literally nothing?
No, and but I'm
He's
saying like
fine.
you have to
He's
you have to
fine.
realize that that's what people are going to say. And honestly, he's a career
No,
politician
he's
anyway.
not. Nobody's gonna say that. Nobody is gonna say, "Oh, the poor politician that's living in government housing has to move, and he only has $120,000 a year pension." Nobody's saying that, German. I'm sorry. No, I
No, not at
disagree.
all. And it's interesting. Like I said, and that's the only thing that now he's going to have to find his own thing, and he's no longer working either, too. So it's not to say $120,000 is a small bunk of change or anything. Like I'm saying, if I had $120,000 pension, I'd be pretty happy. Just say.
Who was talking about? Somebody was talking about how like it was a liberal for sure. But he was like, oh well, Poilievre's still young. He's only 45, which is hilarious that that's like young in politics. But he was like, he could go into the private sector and get some actual experience beyond a paper boy, and then maybe come back to public service. And I was like, oh, shade was thrown.
And I think that's the concerns were happy with what they did from holding the vote, but losing your leader is a big deal now, right? And that's what they have to grapple with, right? I think that is.
I don't know that they're going to have any other choice than to try to make him leave.
And
but I think that will happen.
I think that's the biggest story, like of the conservative election.
I think it's the biggest story of the election. Poilievre lost a seat. Nobody saw that coming. I mean, even this week, like I mentioned it.
I saw the article. I saw that they were predicting it was going to happen.
Yeah, but I remember telling you about that, and you were like, "Nuh-uh, send me the article."
And then I think I saw it show up on the weekend. I was like, and then I mentioned it to my mother about it, and she's saying, no, that would never happen. I say, there's an article that's going around now that's talking about. She said that would not happen. I said, I think it will happen this time. And then of course we knew Jagmeet Singh was going to lose his right as well already, right?
Yeah.
So that was kind of fun to watch too.
Well, yeah, Jagmeet.
Oh man, that was depressing though. Even the people who were at the party.
So sad.
He was like, people at that party were like, oh my god, he's just drinking water constantly. Like you can tell he's like, actually people saying like, because I was sitting beside a reporter, which I won't name in this thing. I'm sure people would know who she is. She's a very famous reporter and journalist, and she said, honestly, he's a nice guy. She said
that's what everybody says about who's met him, is that he's really genuine, really nice,
and he cares, and he really cares. And his wife is absolutely lovely, just gorgeous inside and out personality, right?
Yeah.
And they're a wonderful couple and wonderful.
I thought he was gonna start crying on the stage.
But like honestly, like they're like, like honestly, they felt so bad for him because like like he can go back to do law and do all this stuff because he has a law degree, right? But he's very educated and he has a career outside, right? So I
mean, I'm not worried about any one of them not being able to like move on. Like Poilievre can definitely go into the private sector.
He has lots of experience now. He has lots of experience now,
right? Like
he has lots of experience now, and Poilievre has been in government and also has been in opposition, so he has a lot of understanding of government experience stuff.
He just got some consulting job that he said he was going. Oh, here's actually something really interesting that people were talking about in Carleton, and why this story kind of emerged and things switched a little bit last week. It turns out, and I didn't know this about Carleton, but that particular riding, I guess, has a lot of federal workers in it, and close to the end of the campaign, he started talking about how he was basically going to take a chainsaw to public service.
And that scared people. I
mean, if your riding has a bunch of federal workers, maybe it's not so smart to be like, I'm going to take your jobs. Please still elect me.
I like what this person online said. I'm not going to mention the name, but this person online wrote a really neat comment. And I think this is I hope conservative people take this into consideration. And it says, I voted conservative. Our local candidate was a local government official and well-liked, which I had high hopes for. However, she lost. I also voted conservative in the last election and was disappointed with the result. The fact that Aaron O'Toole was quickly tossed aside, I think if he had remained or had Charest elected as leader of the Conservative Party, there would be a celebration today. Still, Carney is our prime minister. I definitely have some concerns, including all of his money and how this will affect his decisions. But he's untested and certainly comes with a long, impressive resume. Even some doubts in my mind, I will give him a chance to prove himself. I don't I don't think this will be just more Trudeau. Carney is an independent thinker, and I pray he would do great things for our nation.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
I hope conservatives really see similarly things,
we
right?
both know that that's not going to happen on the left
I
or the
know, but
right.
like I just hope like this guy's a conservative. He voted conservative, and he's like, you can tell he's a conservative person. But I think he's willing to give Carney a chance.
I mean, I think the thing with Carney is like I said, he's a progressive conservative. So like the conservatives I've talked to are it's kind of interesting because they're not as scared of Carney as they were, say, Justin Trudeau. But it's an interesting dynamic because they mention like how much money he has and like how they're worried that he'll take their jobs. But like the whole time, all I could think was like, did you listen to Poilievre talk? He talked about cutting the budget through federal worker jobs. He played ball hockey in $2,000 shoes. Like neither one of these candidates are your average working class candidate. And I'm sure on our podcast, people are going to be like, and I know this will come up in May where people will be like, you guys seem to be like pro Carney and now all you do is complain about him. Yes, we are definitely going to have criticisms of shit Carney does.
And the thing about there's lots of situations where the leader lost their seat and still had a government in place. Like look at Sir John A. Macdonald, for example, is a prime example of winning a majority government in 1878, I think it is, or whatever it was. And he still got a majority government, but didn't get a seat. And there's other cases where leaders still won government, or even were opposition, but still didn't get seats. And some of them actually came back to win. So as long as Poilievre learns from this thing and sort of figures out he could come back and do amazing next time. It's all about that timing situation sometimes.
Right.
In politics, like I can tell you, one of the guys I know in one of the writings, he's been involved in politics for many years. And he actually, Coley Horgan, got a seat now. And he's been involved in politics. He worked for the NDP. Publicly, he talked about he worked for the University of Calgary. He did a good job. He's been involved in around politics for many years, and he never went into politics for a number of years because he has a young family and kids and a wife and everything. He has to support them, and a good job at the University of Calgary as vice president. So why would you give up a job like that? But he ran here because nobody was running in the riding, incumbent-wise. And look at him; he's got a seat right now, as long as the result holds. So it's all about that timing, right? Sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and I think like people kind of had this seemed to be like. Who was talking about this morning? One of the American podcasts. I think it was The Bulwark. Yeah, it was The Bulwark. The first video they put out today was Tim Miller singing "Oh Canada" and being super excited that Mark Carney won. And they brought on JJ someone. He's like a Canadian right-leaning centrist type of podcaster to talk about sort of what's happened here. So it's been also really interesting to see like the reaction of Americans who are suddenly watching CBC because that was where they tuned into to try to like figure out what's going on and what things will look like going forward. So that's sort of like an interesting aspect. And Canadians definitely voted on like the Trump factor. But then, as JJ was saying, there was this other faction within the conservative vote. It wasn't just one thing. They voted for like a number of different reasons. Everybody had like the one thing, right? Whether that was like change or crime or affordability. And so like, it's kind of interesting to me that the conservatives were being criticized quite a bit for their sort of all over the place messaging, trying to find where they should land. And interestingly enough, I think because they couldn't figure out where to land, it benefited them a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's a heartbreaking situation for all those other parties for sure, right?
I mean, the last time the NDP has been here before. In the 1990s, they also fell below official party status. So yes, it's going to be a lot harder. They're not going to have the resources in the House or the staffing. However, and this is going to be an interesting part of this, the Parliament can basically vote to allow the NDP to have those things. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when the NDP ask for that.
But we know that they'll be going through a leadership race now.
Yeah, but like that's still not going to take 4 years. So once that's sorted out, like I guarantee you they're going to ask Parliament to allow them to have their resources and stuff. I will be shocked if the Liberals don't. Especially if it looks like the numbers shake out the way they are. They're at 169 and the numbers are moving super fast right now. So I think things are finally like firming up. So I think we're going to be sitting at 169 to 144. I could be wrong. I'm watching CBC. That's why I'm not looking at you.
No, it's interesting. Like it's interesting time to say the least. It's an exciting time if you're a certain types of party, and it's a scary time too for both.
Well, and just not knowing, right? Like,
but honestly, I'm more like for me, I'm more interested. Yeah, the overall results are real important, but I'm more interested in the individual ridings myself right now. But because I'm interested to see like kind of the stories that come out of these things, right?
Cool, you're in charge of that for tomorrow. Congratulations.
Yeah, there's lots of stories that you can talk about, right? About these things right now, and like I like the overall results because the overall results are what. Probably is what is needed right now. I even talked to a few people about it, and a few of them voted for Carney and the Liberal Party because they felt like he was the best person for the job. Right?
Yeah, I mean that remains to be seen.
He's given a mandate, and now he has to prove himself.
I mean, okay. So here's the thing. Here's the last thing. Maybe I'll leave it here. This like we were given a mandate thing. It's really frustrating to me because he isn't given a mandate. He's going to have a minority government.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to think very carefully about how he's going to proceed. He needs to work across the aisle. Yes, if with conservatives, if he has any hope of unifying this country, because people are real pissed in Saskatchewan and Alberta right now. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that can happen. I would say there's a higher chance of that being able to happen if the Conservatives finally learn their lesson, say to Poilievre, no, you lost your seat, you're done, bye, try again next election to run for MP if you want, we're happy to do that. And then as a Conservative Party, get together and elect somebody that's more center-right than this like far-leaning MAGA crap that clearly Poilievre was also trying to tiptoe around, which also kind of impacted his ability to criticize Trump and really get up into that race there, right? To kind of try to steal the votes, particularly from boomers who are worried about their pensions and watching the stock market fall and the tariffs and stuff, right? So it'll be interesting to see like how this shakes out over 4 years and whether or not the Liberals, because here's the thing about Carney. Yes, this was the outcome I wanted. Nobody's perfect. You kind of look at the candidates and you go, okay, who's the least worst of the bunch? But Carney's pretty arrogant. And we saw that last night. Like he didn't start last night's speech with, I actually thought that Poilievre's speech was better than Carney's, to be honest, because Poilievre got right to the point of unity when conservatives in the building were booing Carney. He was like, we'll have plenty of time to like criticize, but right now it's about Canada. It took Carney like 10 minutes, 15 minutes to get to a unity part. Like he's very, it'll be interesting to see what happens because I'm not sure if he can get over his arrogance that I think keeps sort of peeking out. Like he did talk about like humility and values and stuff last night, but talking about it and doing it are two different things. And like, you can see him struggling because he's not he's not really a politician. I mean, he is now, congratulations. But I don't know how he's going to be able to sort of adapt to that. And he's going to need to do that if he wants an actual future and doesn't want to be a Paul Martin one-term kind of prime minister.
Yeah, and that's the problem. That's something he has to fix pretty quickly. Otherwise, he's going to get kicked very, very, very quickly.
Yeah,
And
and sorry, go ahead.
there's a short leash on him right now, and people voted him for a reason, and they voted because they felt like he was the best person for the job. But if he doesn't prove it, he's going to get kicked out very, very fast.
Well, and not even just like proving it. Like I think he legitimately needs to show that he's willing to work with the bloc, the
Mhm.
NDP, and even the Conservatives if the Conservatives can figure out their shit. In order to look ahead to the next election 4 years from now, because otherwise the NDP is going to go right back up and it's possible we'll get a conservative government, whatever that looks like. Maybe that'll be fine 4 years from now. Maybe not. I don't know. But I think the Liberals definitely need to like sort of have their eyes on that from day one, which is better for Canada anyway. Like I want the Liberals to make sure they're working with the NDP. And the minority government is kind of your best way, right? You can have our 3 votes, but you need to make sure you're still supporting pharmacare, which when you have a progressive conservative in charge is like a fair concern.
Yeah, it's interesting times. Lots to talk about and
Yeah,
lots to understand going forward, right?
crazy. Okay. Well, do you have any last thoughts? I'm still watching CBC. I think we're going to
No.
be at, they're saying it's going to be really hard for them to make 172. So I think we're going to stick at 169 is going to be that final number.
Yeah, which is not too bad either.
No, it's basically a majority. They're going to have no problems.
Yeah, like I said, I'm really not too worried about that, right? I think it benefits the Conservatives because they didn't get that 172 mark, but it also benefits the Liberals.
I think it benefits Poilievre more than it does the Liberals
Yeah.
or the Conservatives as a whole, because if the Liberals managed to get a majority, I think Poilievre would have been completely done, 100%. Right now, there's a tiny chance, and like Jason Kenney was talking yesterday about how like at this point, Poilievre hadn't officially lost his seat. And Jason Kenney and Chantal kind of like got into it a little bit. But basically, Jason Kenney was saying like that he knows that the Conservative Party is also aware that like having 4 leaders in 14 years is probably not where you want to be. So there might be a part of the party that's hesitant to like boot out yet another leader. So I think there's like a tiny, tiny chance that Poilievre makes it through that leadership review, but there would be 0 chance if the Liberals got a majority government. They'd be like, get out. You blew a 25-point lead, lost your seat, and the Libs got majority? No.
No way.
Yeah. So we'll leave it there. Like I said, we'll be back tomorrow. Rio's going to join us, and that'll go up tomorrow night. I'll put this up online right after. We're off. So hopefully we talk to you guys all tomorrow. See ya.
Bye.